Hello, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you my 5-ish steps to getting a great lo-fi guitar tone very quickly. And I'm going to be making a lo-fi track at the end to show off that tone. I'm going to show you how to take boring, ordinary chords and turn them into great sounding lo-fi chords, as well as showing you the tone that I apply to my guitar to make it sound good for lo-fi tracks. Let's get straight into the first step of lo-fi guitar, which is to get the tone correct. So I'm running an Epiphone Les Paul direct into Logic Pro, which I have loaded up on my computer there, and I'm just running it through a clean virtual amp, and I've got some kind of spacey reverb layered on, but just slightly. Okay, so the second thing I'm going to do is spice up my guitar sound using effects and modulation. And for this you can use pedals or software like I'm using. Alright, so the first effect I've got on my guitar is retro chorus. And what that does is it makes the guitar kind of sound washed out and a bit more ambient. And it does that by duplicating the guitar signal and playing it back at slightly different frequencies. Kind of hear the guitar at the same time. So I've got it on quite weak here. You can still hear the chorus effect in the background. The next effect I've put on my guitar is tremolo, and I've again put it on quite light just to add a subtle effect. And what tremolo does is it changes the volume of the guitar periodically in a set rhythm, and that adds a nice dynamic range to the guitar. The next effect I have on my guitar is a tape delay, and you can either use tape delay or analog delay for this, and that just gives it a lovely analog sound, or like it's been run through a tape machine, and it makes it sound kind of old-fashioned and nostalgic. It's a nice retro sound. So the next thing to consider when writing guitar parts for lo-fi tracks is the chord progressions you're going to use. And I'm going to show you how to take a simple and boring kind of basic chord progression and just spice it up a bit and make it perfect for lo-fi tracks. And to do that for lo-fi there's a very specific trick, and that is to add 7th, 9th, 11th and 13th notes to your chords. So if I turn this D minor into a minor 7th chord by playing that 7th there, then it works really well for lo-fi. So I'm going to take a simple chord progression here in A minor, D, F, and then C, and I'm just going to take those chords and I'm going to change them into 7th, 9th and 11th and 13th chords. So hopefully you can hear that that sounds a lot kind of more interesting and lo-fi. So now I'm going to try it with another chord progression, and I'll put the chords and tabs up on the screen. You're welcome to steal them. So the bass chords I'm going to use for this are D minor and B flat major, and I'm going to turn them into the lo-fi chords. Alright, so another trick I have for lo-fi chord progressions is to keep them interesting, because often lo-fi tracks are a 4-bar section of chords that are just repeated over and over. But sometimes to keep the listener interested, you can slightly change those chords on the second run through. So the change I've made on the second run through is to change the final B13 to a diminished chord, and I'm using a C sharp diminished, sliding up to an E diminished, and diminished chords are another great set of chords that you can use for lo-fi progressions. So I'll play that through now. So my final tip of today, probably number 5. I don't really know, I haven't been keeping count, but this tip is to bend your chords. And what I mean by that is to bend the neck so that the chords kind of flutter. So if you play a chord and then just grab your headstock and pull it inwards, then it shortens the length of the neck and it makes the chord tone lower for a second, and it sounds really good. So I think it's really effective if you use kind of every 4 bars, just when it sounds right. Another way to use this trick without actually bending your guitar neck is to automate it using software. So I have a plugin called Vinyl on Logic Pro. It's by a company called Izotope and it's a free plugin, it's great. I'll leave a link in the description for you to get it for yourself if you want. And it simulates the sound being played through vinyl, so it gives it a nice kind of crackly, sometimes warped, sometimes dusty effect. But anyways, it's a lovely analog effect. But the thing I'm interested on this at the moment is the warp setting. And I've just set it to 19-20% at the moment, so it's very subtle. If I play a chord, it's like it's being played through a warped vinyl. I'll turn the warp effect up for you to 80% so you can hear what's going on there. So it kind of replicates the effect of bending your neck. So I like to use that on my guitar parts subtly, and then just bend my guitar neck when I feel like it needs an extra bit of a push. So there's my 5 tips on how to get great lo-fi guitar tone and create very lovely lo-fi chord progressions.